Seeking English, S.A.T. Workbook, page 329, problem 4. So far, this is the video that I think is most likely out of this series to be removed and replaced with some other video later, and you're gonna see why. Problem 4: the number of cars at the car dealership is reduced by 10% in the first sales quarter of the year. If the number of cars decreased an additional 20% over the second sales quarter of the year, then by what percent did the number of cars decrease over the 2 sales quarters? Available answers are 25%, 28%, 30%, and 45%. This is where we get to the messy part. The question doesn't have the word remaining in it, and yet I have read it many, many times, and I think it can, just in terms of the structure of the words, you could about equally well interpret it to mean that the 20% taken away is taken from the initial 100%, or that the 20% is taken away from what's left after removing 10%. And since I don't have an answer key to help me read the mind of the person who decided this was a good question, I'm going to use this as an opportunity to talk more about ambiguous questions on the test. And there may be an ambiguous question on the test. All 5 tests that I teach, the study materials, have ambiguous questions in them. And the worst one, ambiguous or worse, the worst one is not an S.A.T. question. The worst one I deal with is the infamous mold question in the Manhattan Prep GRE book. If you've seen that, oh, it's worse than this. Okay. So there are only 2 ways to do this, and both answers that you would get are on the answer list. So you get to probably eliminate half of the answers at least before you, I don't know, flip a coin. Don't flip a coin. We can do slightly better than that, and I'll explain why. One answer is if you're just looking at the cost of concluding an answer versus the benefit of concluding an answer, you would take the answer that takes less effort to conclude. That's going to be easier to calculate. Mathematically, all by itself, that sounds like a good strategy, and you may prefer that. I'm gonna argue though that in my experience with many types of tests, that there's at least a small bias in favor of a more complicated answer. So in a case like this, my suggestion is that you consider, do some simulations and things, look into it. Don't just take my word for it. But at this point, it's my very soft opinion that there's an advantage to taking the more complex answer in a problem like this. Okay, it takes slightly longer to calculate. If it's equally likely to be wrong, then you shouldn't do that. But maybe it's not equally likely to be wrong. Okay. So what we have here is two versions of the story. We have 100% of the cars that we start with. We take away 10% of those cars, and we take away an additional 20% of those cars. 70% are left. And the thing they're asking for is how many cars were taken away, which would be 10% plus 20% is 30%. So 70% are left, 30% were taken away. That's the simple version. And like I said, that's the more efficient answer to reach, assuming that both answers are equally likely to be right or wrong. Okay, this is the more complex version I talked about. You take 100% of the cars that you started with, you multiply by 90%, you multiply by 80% because this is minus 10% of something. This is minus 20% of something. Okay, so the 9 and the 8 produce this 72. There's going to be 72% of the original cars left, and from there you subtract 72% from 100%, and you get 28%. So possible answers are 30 and 28. And both those are on the list in the middle, which I may have mentioned before. It's my belief are very slightly more likely to be the correct answers. 25 and 45. I'm not sure how people would get those answers, but there have to be enough wrong answers, so they have to come from somewhere. If you can tell me why, tell me in the comments section why somebody would give a 25% answer to this or a 45% answer. I would be very curious. It would be very enlightening to me to see any reason why how somebody could make a mistake like that. In the meantime, 28 is the more complicated answer. And in a case like this, I would say that my experience suggests that by a very small margin, 28 is more likely to be the answer that they're expecting from you. Thanks.